As you know, people that have done this course with me will know that we grapple these questions together, some of the kind of intricacies and misunderstandings that come up in studying the course. But the course itself obviously is not just the text of Abu Hanifa, it's also an extensive commentary by Abū Muntaha al-Maghnisawī, a pre-Ottoman scholar, and also Mulla al-Qārī, who is an amazing encyclopedic scholar of the Islamic sciences from present-day Herat in Afghanistan. That's the course that we do, and it's an interesting one because it's a deep dive essentially into Islamic belief. The reason why the Aqidah work is so important is that it has very important contemporary modern ramifications, because my kind of title here, 5 Reasons Aqidah is Critical. In the modern age, it's critical. It was critical in the past. I could tell you why Aqidah is important. It's important because it allows you to understand the position of the Salaf, the early Muslims, on specific questions. It allows you to understand the textual basis for why you believe in God and the angels and the messengers and Qada and Qadar and these kind of unseen things that we all believe in from blind faith in some ways in terms of the angels and the jinn. But that's not, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that studying that from a classical perspective, studying Islamic studies with one eye on the modern context is so important, especially in this day and age. It is not important, it's critical. Critical means, we're talking about life and death in terms of faith. We're definitely talking about that. We're talking about to have faith or not to have faith. And to quote Shakespeare, to be or not to be Muslim. I mean, is that critical? Because when I deal with Muslims and they present their questions to me, it always comes down to some very, very critical issues that essentially are about whether they actually believe or not, and what are the obstacles that come in the way. So I've kind of come up with 5 things which I believe at the very forefront of those reasons why people really need to get a handle on creed, really kind of need to go into a deep dive of creed, get a handle of it and really own it. The first one is, seems superficial, but it's actually it's at the core of why you need to study creed, which is to deepen, not to have faith, but to deepen faith, which is why this course is called Deep Creed. It's not just to have the faith, but we have this understanding in our text, which is from the story of the Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ, when he said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "Oh Allah, show me how you give life to the dead." Now, he believed that belief, which is to say I believe and to know that you believe. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "Do you not believe?" And obviously he said, "Bala, of course I believe. وَلَكِنْ لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي." But rather I want my heart to become still. And stillness comes from depth. And so to go beyond the ritualistic understanding of our faith, to ritualistic understanding of believing God and the Messenger, for example, there is a way of going deeper than that. It's to have a sense of purpose in that. Because if you think about it, I'll tell you why that is really important, is because yesterday I was doing a course, in this course, Deep Creed. It was one of the seminars that we were doing. We have 6 seminars throughout the year. And the last thing that I was doing was on the question of evil and why evil exists and what's the purpose of it. And this is the reason why in Europe most people left Christianity, left Judaism, left belief in God. If you look at any major Western European country, you will see that more people don't believe in God than believe in God, and that trajectory is going in one direction alone. At the core of it is the question of suffering and evil. Why does God, if he is omnibenevolent, loving, omnipotent, all-powerful, omniscient, all-knowing, why does not just step in? And so that is one of the things that stops your faith becoming deepened. It's almost as if, imagine, if you were to say that Allah sent another prophet, and there can be no prophet of the Prophet ﷺ, you can imagine that modern person who was a prophet would end up saying, "Oh Allah, why did you create evil?" Because that's the question that's on everybody's lips. Essentially what Deep Creed does is gives you a very clear answer of that. In other words, and last night when I was teaching the class, I gave them 7 premises from the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in how to address the question of evil I could bring up now, but I don't want to digress into it. It's quite interesting because I was thinking all through the day. I was thinking, what are the top 7? What's the top 7 premises? The first is to know God, meaning to know the qualities that God has and the qualities that we believe God does not necessarily have, such as being unendingly merciful and compassionate and loving, because we don't believe that as Muslims. Christianity does. And that's why they fall into this idea that, well, if God loves everything, why doesn't he just step in? So the first thing is deepening faith. And the deepening of faith also is more important in the contemporary context, in the modern world, because we have shaitans, we have the waswasa, we have the whisperings, not of, our kind of pre-modern way of whispering, but you have voices pushing messaging into your mind at all points of your day through devices, you've got social media on the devices, you've got your work colleagues, you've got society in general, just putting in the seeds of doubt in every single thing that you read. I was reading something about Ricky Gervais, a very famous comedian, but also very famous atheist comedian who makes no secret of his hatred towards religion generally, and not hatred, actually, it's mockery. I was reading something about the fact that he's got a long-term partner, and he was asked, well, why don't you marry her? And he says, well, he said, I don't see the point of formalizing it in front of God when there's no God. And so everything he says almost always veers towards an attack on God. We're living in a society where religion is mocked, the belief in God is mocked, belief in God is mocked. And therefore, Aqidah is required to deepen. It's so important to deepen faith at this moment in time. What I said, it's critical. And why is that important? I'll tell you why it's important. Because you, as an individual, have to be a bedrock of, first of all, your own existential being, your consciousness, that you are unshakable in terms of the fact that when you say, Amantu billah, I believe in Allah, that belief, and when you say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, that testification is not just, something you say in your tongue and say, Ashhadu, I testify, I have said. It's actually, as is known, Shahada also means to have shuhud, which is to witness, to see, to experience, and to bear witness to what you've experienced, which is to say, I testify that I've witnessed that there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his true messenger. Especially in a month like Rabi'ul Awwal, that I was speaking to my son just before he was falling asleep. I was telling him about every night, I try to tell him one thing about the Prophet before he's going to sleep. And I was saying, what does it mean for the Prophet to be the messenger? Sorry, what does it mean for Muhammad to be the messenger? What does he come in terms of message? And obviously you need to be sure about that as a person, as a parent, to be able to give it to your child. The second thing is, related to that, I'm going from the most personal, deep, thing that is related to yourself in terms of issues. I'm going to going all the way up to the most public. And related to this deep personal one is empowerment and resilience, strength, but knowledge essentially is power. We're living in an age when, and I was speaking to somebody just the weekend about artificial intelligence, and we were discussing about, job prospects for children and things. And it all came down to the fact that knowledge, information, education, and types of education are going to be critical. And so Aqidah is essentially all about knowing things that are important. How do you know what you know? And in fact, some of Aqidah right at the beginning actually talks about the fact that certain things are real and have a reality and are objective. So Haqiqatul Ashya Thabitatun, as Imam Nasafi says, that the reality of things, beings is set. There's no movement. There's certain things that are and always will be as they are. In a context of a Western society, in fact, let me just not say that, not in a Western society, I would say modern, worldwide context, there is a definite need to empower yourself through knowledge of creed, because creed is the most essential Islamic science. It's the first thing that you're asked about. In the grave, you've got 3 questions. The questions are not, how many raka'at do the Hanafis say, you pray for Taraweeh or whatever. It's not like a fiqh question. It's Man Rabbuka, Ma Dinuka, who is your Lord, what's your religion? ماذا كنت تقول في حق هذا الرجل? What did you say about this person? You'll be shown an impression of the Prophet ﷺ, the blessed countenance of the Prophet ﷺ. You'll be asked, what do you say about this person? So this is going to require you to be empowered with knowledge. So if you think about it, if you've done the iSyllabus diploma course, you'll know that creed generally is about three things. It's about what you believe, why you believe it. In other words, proof, istidlal, the kind of textual proofs for that. And also the idea of removing obfuscations and doubts that come. And think of all things I've just mentioned at the beginning, deepening faith from the waswasa of the shaitan, and everything you read, there's something there that is planted to make you doubt of the providence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also, there is this sense that, as a Muslim, if you believe because your parents believed, or you believe because your friends believe, or you believe because the social grouping within which you move as an individual believes, that's not sufficient. You have to believe based on proof. Rather than blindly following the crowd, believe based upon evidence, reflection, introspection, analysis. And also the last thing about having this tenacity, this empowerment, this resilience within yourself is something that is to do with, I would say, I'm going to say it. Should I say it? Yeah, I'll say it. The bullying. There's a kind of bullying culture amongst Muslims. Also among scholars. I mean, this is something I try and be very wary of when I'm teaching, of telling people that they have to believe in certain things when those things are not conclusive and absolute. And so, you're kind of, imagine, when I remember when I was started on my path towards, practicing and finding out about Islam, constantly there was no shortage of people, putting more onto your shoulders, saying, Ruzwan, I need to do this. You need to believe in this. I need to believe in that. Oh, my sheikh is this and this and that. And all of a sudden, you've filled up like this donkey. That's what we are essentially. Is filled up with all these things that you have to believe. And essentially, if you knew creed, aqidah, you would have the resilience to say, no, I'm sorry, I don't have to believe in that, and that, because there's no consensus on that. There's no unanimity on those points. I'm sorry, I'm out. And that, in this day and age, I mean, it is really important, because what happens is, I think people get religious OCD, either in terms of fiqh, where they're kind of constantly thinking, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. Oh, did I do this properly? I didn't do it. I'll go back and try it again. I'll do it again. I'll do it again. That's not the way that a Muslim is. But also related to that is the fact that we as a community also have to be careful about what we're told to believe, because certain things you're told to believe are not essential. Part of, in the Muslim world, what's happened a lot is that, a lot of political issues have become religious issues, so that people are told to be a Muslim and to be a proper Muslim, you have to sign up to the manifesto. There's religious brotherhoods in Sufism that will then start to jockey to gain adherence, and therefore try and present that as being the only way that you can gain proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those are kind of the two starting points that I think are really important in terms of critical points of Aqidah: deepening your faith, and then creating resilience within yourself, creating tenacity, creating some kind of empowerment through knowledge, which is the basis. Those two are the basis for something that most people would think is not related to creed, which is identity. Identity is essentially, who are you? You'll say, well, my name. Your name is what you were given by your parents. Okay, then the next way you'd identify yourself is through, the city you live in, the team that you support, if it's football, or any specific social grouping you connect to, the country you're from, and so on and so forth. But at a deeper level, there is this sense that, we say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, we testify, that thing I was saying, that deepness of faith based upon testifying. Now, the reason why identity I think is right up there as a critical issue in terms of creed nowadays in this day and age is for one simple reason, which is that the modern human is faced with one crisis which is unlike any crisis that they have. So this is going to tie into creed. Why? Because as Muslims, we're not immune from that. The biggest crisis I think that humanity has in terms of individuals is the crisis of identity. The reason why it's a critical issue is that identity is not just found in things like your nation, your tribe, your family. Nowadays, it's found in terms of just the most mundane, lowly aspects of life, such as the sexual act, or sexuality, or gender preference. So your identity now is almost like, these lanyards you get that people are almost coerced to wear, and that shows you how identity has crept in through a mundane, lowly level, whereas in the past, identity was based on faith, on tribe, on nations, and so on and so forth. Why is that important to Muslims? Is because we're going through the same thing. We're going through exactly the same thing in terms of every other religious community. The Jewish community 200 years ago went through a similar crisis where they had to make their religious practice more palatable to other people. And the way they did that is to make their religion much more secular and to present themselves as an identity that wasn't based upon belief, which is aqidah, which is why I'm saying it's so important, but based upon just ethnic identity, national identity, and certain cultural traits like dietary laws and so on and so forth. And so that's a big, big problem, because nowadays you'll find that Muslims identify themselves as Muslims, but all they want is their halal meat. Perfectly okay to do that, but there's something deeper. They want to, have political issues that they want to fight for, absolutely perfectly justifiable, in fact, laudable as well, and praiseworthy. But at the very core of a Muslim identity has to be shahada, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And the more you erode that, the more that there'll be a diminished reason for you as a community to exist. And because very slowly you'll start to identify as a community that just wants rights. So you just want rights as Muslims, concessions, or you'll become even probably worse situation is that you base it upon grievance, which is you say that you're being victimized, and then your identity is essentially a victim group, and that's unbefitting. I would say, subhanallah, it's unbefitting of a Muslim community that it identifies itself essentially as a community that is groveling based upon the fact that it feels itself victimized. There's no problem in seeking redress to that, but there's a very fine line between that and tying ourselves, almost bolting ourselves into being a community which is based upon a grievance culture. So those are kind of the top three ones that I mentioned. Deepening your faith, which is really why creed is so important nowadays. The second is to have a kind of a strong core within yourself of being resilience, personal resilience. And the third, just mentioned, is the issue of identity. The fourth is a big one. I think this is quite an interesting and important one, which is the community itself is in a very precarious situation because there's people that essentially claim leadership of the community. People post videos up and then they place them, on YouTube, on social media, and then they pontificate. In other words, they kind of present themselves as being authorities on issues, and anything that happens, they're commenting and they're discussing and they're refuting and debating and so on and so forth. There's something of I would say a disease within the community where, the lack of proper training, lack of proper knowledge, a lack of insight into the tradition, a lack of prophetic character leads to a skewed presentation of Islam generally. And I would call that demagoguery. Demagoguery meaning basically you're shouting over people. You're basically oppressing people through a presentation of your own religious training or knowledge or insights. And essentially everybody has that mic or that loudspeaker through which they can project their own views, and the only thing that will counter that is the people that listen to it are clued up on the basis of their religious tradition. That's the only thing I believe that will, allow Muslims to be able to counter that narrative, because the narrative is an extreme narrative. The narrative is one where, you shoot from the hip. You just half-baked understanding of an issue, and that happened during, a number of instances over the last couple of years. A controversial issue happens, everybody shoots from the hip, and everybody says things that are on face value seem to be, they're justified to say it, but the ramifications of them, those things will be quite dangerous. And the community, I don't need to give examples of it, but there's many, many examples that, come to my mind, where Aqidah is the thing that allows you to differentiate between what is essential to believe and what is not essential, what's not important to believe. What interpretation is correct, which one is not. That depth is extremely important for a Muslim to, first of all, navigate themselves through the situation that they're in. And secondly, it's really important in terms of presenting a coherent kind of image of the faith to other people. So again, in the Deep Creed course, what we do is we go through that. We go through the book of Abu Hanifa, we go through Imam Maghnisawī, al-Qāri's commentary, we go through contemporary case studies as well. The question of evil, for example, another one we did was love is love. Is it true that love is love? Is morality objective or not? So all these things are contemporary discussions that we go through, but we always tie into this idea of going into the sources and anchoring your faith in the sources of the Quran and Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So the last thing is that creed itself, in this context, allows you now to navigate all the big issues that Muslims are facing. It's almost like a necessary, absolutely important and essential toolbox for every Muslim to have, so they can start to engage with all the extremely intricate issues that they have in day-to-day life. Because, if you think about it, you can say, well, I need to study fiqh, I need to study sharia, I need to study hadith or Quran. Absolutely, to recite, to pray the prayer, you need to recite the Quran. It's a given. To understand the Prophet ﷺ's depth of his knowledge and his wisdom, you have to understand the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. But if you have to understand what it means to be a Muslim and what that entails, that's creed. And even things about actions, like to know what is absolutely essential for you to do as a Muslim, where you learn that, and it's called in Arabic al-Ma'lum min ad-dīn bid-darūra, what's known to be part of religion by necessity. You don't get that in books of fiqh, you get that in books of creed. In other words, what is it that I have to, as a Muslim, adhere to be a Muslim in truth, and what is non-negotiable, and what is something that I cannot, compromise on. Those issues you will find in books of creed. And that's like, nowadays what all issues people talk about. Well, something that came up last year or during this year was the issue of whether certain acts are sins or not. Now, where would you find that out? You'd find that out in books of creed. Whether you can deny that, homosexual intercourse is haram, you'd find that designed in terms of its answer from books of creed, because the texts of the Quran on that are very, very clear. The texts on the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, they are very, very explicit and clear. And therefore, the equation goes through the process of Aqidah, and the Aqidah comes out and says, well, this is something that is known to be part of religion by necessity. And therefore, to deny it would be something that would take a person out of the core of Islam. If they're a Muslim, it would take them out of the core of Islam. Now, where's that all coming from? That's all coming from this discussion of fiqh. Interacts with something called creed, and creed gives the ruling about what a person's faith is like if they do something specific. So, creed is right up there. Once you've got your basics correct and you've done something like the diploma course, Creed is something that you should definitely think about. What we're doing, what we're offering in terms of iSyllabus, is something we did actually over 2 years, but because of the importance of it, we felt we could actually present it in a much more accessible 1-year format, which is the deep courses that we're doing, the iSyllabus deep course in Creed, and also Sheikh Amr will be doing the deep course in Fiqh. Those two are 1-year courses, and as you know, I mentioned at the beginning, we have those courses open for enrollment. My course, which is the course on DEEP AQIDAH, the first lesson of that, which is the way we kick it off, is actually available on YouTube. You can go into the iSyllabus page on YouTube, and you can actually watch the first lesson, accessible publicly. So you get an idea of just setting the stall. It's not the actual content itself, but it's setting the stall for the course itself, giving you an idea of the kind of depth and the kind of setting of the course and the quality of it. And obviously, with the course, I've said we'll have 6 live seminars throughout the year. You have 6 live Q&As, but I didn't mention the fact that there's a forum in which you can put live questions to me and I answer them regularly. And also, you have resources for the course itself. Each seminar has its resource, and the course book has been dissected by myself. And also, I must add on to that the fact that you do have the ability to test your understanding. After every 6 weeks, you have a test which checks your understanding. So, Jazakallah khair al-jaza for joining me. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.